Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hello and welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Lawton. Today we're going to be joined by Rick Watson, who is the CEO and founder of RMW Commerce Consulting. Rick is definitely an expert in the e-commerce space. He posts a lot on LinkedIn about e-commerce. That's actually how we got connected. Our mutual connection, Bruce Welty, who was the guest on episode 1. Actually commented, I think, on one of his posts, and I saw it, and we kind of had a discussion from there, and now we're here today. So Rick's going to talk to us a little bit about his background, what he does, and then, of course, he's going to talk to us a little bit about e-commerce and Amazon and all those different kinds of things. So, Rick, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. It's really great to join you, and it's a beautiful day here in New York City.
Great. Happy to have you on the show, definitely. E-commerce is such a big thing in fulfillment and distribution now. It's like almost essential for a lot of businesses to stay alive. So really happy to have you on. I would say you are an expert, so definitely happy to have you on to talk about it. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of your background so they can understand kind of where your e-commerce knowledge comes from?
Yeah, no, happy to be on the show, and I really appreciate being on. So my background, I've been a little under 20 years in the e-commerce industry, and I got my start back in 99 with a little, now much bigger company called Channel Advisor.
Okay.
My background is originally in electrical engineering and computer science, so I started out in software development. And as my career progressed, I found myself running not only leading software teams, but also leading kind of business teams, launching new products. And in particular, the problem that we were focused on was how to help eBay and Amazon sellers be more successful.
Okay.
How do you take them from selling 20 items a month to selling thousands of items a month? And my vantage point from watching the e-commerce industry from that time was really seeing the origins of the eBay and the Amazon marketplace from the beginning. And, before they had APIs, before they had millions of sellers. And so helping so many businesses over the years is really how I gained my knowledge. So those are some of those big points. I was in North Carolina. I was part of Channel Advisor for about a little over 10 years there.
Okay.
And then some of my other stops later in my career was mostly entrepreneurial type roles. So I was general manager of the third-party marketplace at BarnesandNoble.com. So leading e-commerce teams that are helping basically expand the assortment of Barnes & Noble with in that case, millions of items at the time, and we were partnering with companies like Wayfair and others that clearly are also leaders in fulfillment and distribution.
Definitely.
In a tough industry. From there, I moved on to be CEO of an e-commerce startup in New York City called Merchantry, which I led for several years, and then exited. So that was a marketplace, basically a private label marketplace platform business, helping retailers like Modell Sporting Goods and PacSun expand their assortment and help with drop shipping, which is probably something also that some of your warehouse listeners are involved in one form or fashion.
Definitely.
And then most recently, I was with Pitney Bowes for a little under 3 years as head of product management for their cross-border e-commerce division. So mostly focused on big retailers, helping them with things like payments, conversion, checkout, and supply chain services for retailers, mostly based in the U.S. that are trying to sell into 220 markets around the world. So super complex and interesting topic, especially with all the noise around trade and customs and duties and tariffs. So it's wild, and clients, a lot of brands out there don't know how to navigate that kind of space. So that's really my background in the industry, and it's something I've always been super passionate about.
Definitely, yeah, and I can tell you're passionate about it by your post on LinkedIn. I mean, everything is like so insightful, and I think your posts really make people think about the topic that you're discussing and the article that you usually share along with it. So I'm really happy you could come on and share your 20 years of experience in e-com, seeing kind of the beginning of it to where it's at now. It's grown so much. So currently now you have RMW Commerce Consulting, which is your company, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do from a consulting standpoint and what your company is all about?
Yeah. So this is a company I started earlier this year, really in February, and it's really a strategic advisory firm.
Okay.
Companies come to me generally in a couple of different situations. One, they're trying to enter a new market. A company is doing something new to them to accelerate their growth, and they need help figuring out key questions like, who are we? What is our roadmap for entering this market? Who should our partners be? What should our customer acquisition strategy be? How should we build out our technology platform? How do we access the customers that we're trying to get after?
Mm-hmm.
What are the competitive differentiators we have versus other players in our space? So really helping them think through strategically how to enter a market and not just be in the market, but actually win in that market. So the types of companies that come to me are generally SaaS companies in the e-commerce technology space, as well as marketplaces, as that matches a lot of the background in my experience in the space.
Got it. Interesting. So not only like penetrating into that market, but then succeeding over the long run as well. So really the full-on strategy.
Yeah, that's right. And then I think there are a lot of folks, there are a lot of consulting firms that are out there that are focused on like just marketing or just copywriting or supply chain. I really try to take the CEO and management team view of the business so that we can help them make sure that their strategy is a balanced one that can help them win and not just sort of hit a certain ROAS goal or an advertising goal and to the detriment of maybe some other part of their business.
Got it. Okay. That's good. So now you're so, like we were saying before, you're so like passionate about e-commerce. So what do you think it is about e-commerce that is so interesting to you and makes you so passionate about it?
I think, number one, I've always been passionate about technology. I just happened to get into e-commerce. And so there are a few different aspects. Number one, there are a lot of players in the space, so it's complex. I love analyzing complex situations and understanding how to create win-wins for various partners. Second, it's just so dynamic, as you've noticed, following the supply chain for 5 minutes. Amazon will do something, and then FedEx will respond, and then UPS will chime in, and then Shopify launches something. It's crazy to keep up with all these changes, and really, like, if you're a brand, you're sort of left scratching your head, like, what do I do with all this? And not just because there's a lot of things you can't take as face value. So a company says they're doing X, but while technically they might be offering X, it doesn't necessarily mean they're the best partner in your segment.
Yeah.
They might be the best partner for a smaller brand or a larger brand or someone in apparel, or somebody like that. So that's definitely something that to look out for.
Definitely, yeah. I think there's so many options out there now, and there's so many different things, like you mentioned, like Amazon does something, FedEx does something, and it's like you're there with your smaller company, and you're like, oh, do I need to do something too? So it's like driving everybody to kind of, it's almost like everybody is like challenging each other to get better in some way, which is pretty interesting to see the developments that come of that. And like you mentioned Shopify, and Shopify, I saw you posted about it, but I saw it also because we had Six River Systems on a previous episode of the New Warehouse podcast. So, and Shopify just acquired them, right? So there's all different kinds of things that are happening, and I think it's pretty interesting. So we really want to talk today, I guess, about how we kind of connected. I think you posted an interesting thing on LinkedIn with an article. I forget where the article was from, but it was about what would be Amazon, the Amazon killer, so to speak, right? And is there actually an Amazon killer, right? So how do you feel about Amazon? Because obviously Amazon is such a big player in not only e-commerce space but also just distribution space in general, and logistics space, and now transportation space too, with their own fleet and all those different things. So how do you feel about Amazon, and what do you think about the future of their sustainability? And do you think the way that they're challenging the industry, like we were kind of just talking about, do you think that's in a positive way, or do you think maybe there's some negative effects there as well?
Yeah. So I mean, anything you talk about Amazon is like such a charged issue these days. So let's break down from the fundamentals. I mean, Amazon is an amazing and phenomenal company. Jeff Bezos does not get enough credit for what he has built. Obviously, being the largest billionaire in the world doesn't hurt. And in terms of the pantheon of tech CEOs in the past 30 years, I would put him alongside Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. That's kind of the level I view their execution and strategy and philosophies to building a big business, which is pretty rare air. So that, to me, that's where the conversation starts. Like, it's very hard to deny what they've done is really amazing and truly difficult. Against some of the best fast companies in the world, like eBay and PayPal and just FedEx now. Like, pick a company that they're trying to do. So that's kind of the starting point. I think in terms of the things that are threats to Amazon, there are two big ones that I think about. There's a lot of focus in the tech press about, Best Buy did something and they're really smart against Amazon and now they're doing great, or see, that means you can, Best Buy can beat Amazon. Like, well, they're not really beating Amazon per se, but what they're trying to do is defend their customers so that they don't decline more. Yeah. And e-commerce is growing, so they should be growing, right? So good that they're able to grow faster than the rate of e-commerce, which is great. In terms of the things that I think are real threats to Amazon outside of an individual company are really two things. And the first big one is trust. Amazon is a big place. Over 2 million sellers by any count, over 30 million products by any count. How many distribution centers? You have Amazon fulfilling, you have sellers fulfilling, you have bad seller actors, you have bad buyer actors, you have mistakes, in the supply chain at many different levels, both intentional and unintentional. And so when I talk about trust, there's really, when the buyer, one of the biggest things that e-commerce companies have to worry about is conversion. Because if a buyer visits your website and is staring at the product page or going through the checkout, if they're having doubts that they're actually going to get the product that they want on time and it will show up as described, they're going to bail and go somewhere else.
Definitely.
So if you're reading through Amazon reviews, which is a whole nother topic, there's a whole industry which thinks that this Amazon reviews have been completely gamed these days, which I think they're right to a certain extent. But if you go,
I've seen
to
some things.
If you go to like a Jabra headset and say, if 5 of the 10 reviews on the thing said, well, I got a Jabra headset, but it wasn't the model that I expected. It's not what the picture said. And if that continues more and more, if you have 1 in 10 experiences like that on Amazon, or 1 in 5 experiences like that on Amazon, like, your trust level is going to start to go down. Yeah. And that's going to manifest itself in really 2 ways. Number one is you're going to start going to the manufacturer of that item or to more trusted retailers like maybe a Walmart. You might go to the manufacturer's website directly, which is why a lot of manufacturers are now going to D2C.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one effect. And then the second effect, you get, I'll call it kind of the flea market effect.
Okay.
You could have like the best antique in the world, and if somebody sells it versus if you go down, to the end of your town and you find that same item in the flea market, you're going to buy it for 30% of what Sotheby's would sell it for, because you're trusted, it's authentic. And if you go to Amazon and now you can't trust that the product is what you expect it's going to be, mentally you're going to give that product a price discount in your head. And so if the manufacturer is selling it for $100, then for me to be worth that risk that I might not get exactly what I wanted, you might only buy it on Amazon if it were $80, which that becomes friction for a buyer who may not. Some buyers are okay with that. Some buyers are not okay with that. So that's where I sort of fall on the trust angle of things.
Okay. So
I don't know if that matches your experience on the site or some challenges you might have had buying on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some times where, I see what you're saying, like where, I think, like I'm looking at something and then, it looks like the picture is maybe not as sharp. It's like a fuzzy picture, and you're kind of like, oh, it's being fulfilled by someplace that I've never even heard of. So, there's kind of like that question in your mind, like, is this the legit thing or what's going on here? But unfortunately, I haven't had a bad experience in anything that I've received in terms of it being not what I expected. But I think what you're saying, in terms of going direct to like the manufacturer or like a Best Buy or something for electronics, or something of that nature, like maybe a little bit larger purchase. I tend to feel like I think maybe I would want to go to the manufacturer direct over Amazon first, just because I'm spending more money and I'm not sure if I like necessarily have the trust of where it's coming from, if it's coming from Amazon, right? So I mean, like for Amazon, my personal use of it is like, I'd probably, little things here and there, like toys for my son or something like that. But when it comes to the bigger stuff like that, I mean, I definitely get what you're saying in terms of trust. Like, I don't know if I would go on Amazon and spend like, $800 on something. Like, I think I would much rather go to a manufacturer just because, I don't know what's going to happen. But then at the same time, I think Amazon, because we talk about e-commerce, and then, one of the huge things about e-commerce too is the other side of it, which is the reverse logistics, right? So there's so much e-commerce explosion that there's also a big explosion in reverse logistics, because people are buying things that they're not seeing in person, and it's not working out, so they're returning. But one of the benefits, I think, there, which I recently experienced, is now Amazon has these return it at Kohl's, which is like, I did it and it's super easy. Right. So in that sense, then I'm kind of like, well, maybe I'm unsure about what I'm going to get, but then at the same time, the convenience to return it if I need to is also there. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like a balancing act. It's like, they don't have you in like one part, but then they do something else and they have you in that part. So
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and the effect that will have on a buyer, not that Amazon isn't great, but you will just not go there for that category of product if you stop trusting Amazon in that category. And for me, it used to be that if something had a 5-star review, then I was okay buying it from Amazon. I don't feel that way anymore. I won't buy most people I talk to won't buy anything that's not Prime, right? And then that's the standard now. So before it was like 5-star reviews. Now it's 5-star reviews and Prime. Mm-hmm. Pretty soon it's going to be 5-star reviews, Prime, and next day. And, maybe Amazon is going to come up with some other badge or seal, that the brand is authentic. I mean, there's been a lot of noise about Amazon's choice and senators writing letters to Amazon based on reports, from what I can tell, that they read in the Wall Street Journal. it's a little crazy how regulation seems to happen in this country.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, going back to the review thing, I mean, I have done research on like FBA, fulfillment by Amazon stuff, and like research on setting up shop and getting items and the whole thing, and one of the things that you see is like definitely about getting reviews and like how do I get 5-star reviews, and it's not necessarily like getting them in an authentic way, I would say, right?
Right.
You're kind of like you get some items and you give them to people for free, like friends and family, and then you have them go on give you a good review, or you send them to somebody for free or at a discounted price, and then that's already kind of probably skewing the conscience of people, because they want to kind of pay back, I guess, that they got an item for free or got a discounted item. So I mean, I think definitely your statement about trust, I mean, I think I definitely see how that could have a negative effect on Amazon, definitely. And it's interesting about that because I think that I think what I had said when you posted was I think that the Amazon killer would be the consumer themselves, right? And so that's kind of along the same line. So if the consumers start to lose trust, then the business starts to go down a little bit. But how many, like you said, Amazon has 30 million some SKUs and so many different product categories and different options. How many of those negative instances is it going to take to really make an impact, right? Because you have, out of 30 million, how many sales they do a year, how many customers they have, it's going to have to be like a big wave of mistrust. So what other things do you think might be killer Amazon? I think you said you had two that you were going to talk about.
Yeah, I think the other big one is a trend that I call verticalization. Okay. And essentially, what it means is that Amazon is a big platform that's very shallow and very wide, which means they cover, like you said, 1 million categories, like whatever the number is. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to have, like, if you were to custom design, like the best way to buy a sneaker online, you probably wouldn't design Amazon's experience, right? And so in terms of things that could hurt Amazon's business, not kill it, I don't think, but over time, what happens to these companies is that there's a big platform and they're the giant that everyone is trying to throw stones at and knock down, right? And so this happened to eBay over the past years when they didn't innovate as fast as the rest of the industry. You have like two separate $2 billion sneaker marketplaces that for sure 15 years ago would have been on eBay, guaranteed. Yeah. Because there is nowhere else to go. But if you have alternatives in the market that are VC backed, they get funding, they can acquire customers cheaply, maybe more cheaply than they should be able to if they cared about profitability. But that's kind of a whole other podcast probably. The thing is, I mean, it's been a very well-worn venture capital or investor model over the past 25 years to say, take a big platform and you can call it like eBay, Craigslist, how many different furniture sales sites are there now online, like Apartment Deco and Let Go and OfferUp and Facebook Marketplace that are all taking aim at parts of Craigslist. Like, that's going to keep happening to Amazon more and more as we go forward. Is someone's going to take a very hard category or a unique category that is meaningful, it could be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and try to take Amazon sellers from that experience.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Interesting perspective. Yeah. I think that's definitely something that I'm seeing too. It's interesting that you talk about how eBay kind of didn't stay up to speed, I guess, right? So, because I remember, that you mentioned that, like I remember, eBay was like the big thing online, and then Amazon definitely like quickly jumped in front. So it's pretty interesting to see that growth, and it's cool that you were so involved with it since like the beginning, like 1999. You said when things were starting to really pick up, I guess, online. So really interesting insights definitely on Amazon and their future sustainability and what might be the potential killer of Amazon. But so like you mentioned, a lot of manufacturers are going to open up these, B2C channels as well and go direct to consumers. So, your specialty kind of in your consulting and stuff is helping people, enter new markets and stuff like that. So what would you say is the best way for a company like a manufacturer or a smaller company even, who is looking to open up their own like e-commerce channel to start to sell direct to consumers instead of B2B, or diversify and have a B2B, B2C mix? How would you say is the best way to start to go about that?
Yeah, so I think in the first, one of the first steps is to figure out, number one is just like where your buyers are and who are they? What are the demographics? Where do they interact online? How much are they spending? What sites are they on? Are your buyers on Amazon? Are they not on Amazon? Are they on fashion sites? Like, where are you trying to take share from and be present on? So that's kind of one, I think, big part of the equation that will determine your channel mix. Are you primarily trying to sell through your website and that is really your ultimate strategy, or there are so many businesses that are just on Amazon and don't care about having their own website. Yeah. So a lot of those people are not manufacturers unless they're sort of small and mid-market manufacturers. Mm-hmm. But there's so many CPGs on Amazon now, and that's a direct. If they're selling on 3P, which is third party that they're shipping directly to consumers themselves, then that's a direct-to-consumer business too, although maybe they don't own the consumer relationship, right? So it's sort of part of half of D2C. So one is like determining who your buyers are, which will help you determine where you need to be. And then I think the next big thing is determine like how much are you in this for? Mm-hmm. And I tell people all the time, you could set up an e-commerce platform, the same one, for free, for $500 a month, or for $2 million a year, the same platform. So it's just a true thing in the industry that however much money you have to spend, people are willing to take that away from you. Yeah. Particularly, so this is how I think a lot of manufacturers can get in trouble, because they're used to these massive budgets. And to just start with a basic platform that's selling D2C, you don't need to have, this multi-million-dollar on-premise platform that is future-proof for 10 years, because in 10 years it's going to be out of date anyway. Mm-hmm. Really what you need to do is understand if consumers care about your value proposition, and you can execute the basics of e-commerce, which is really pretty simple. Like, step one, get buyers to your site or whatever site you're talking about. Yeah. Step two, be interesting enough to convert them. And then 3, satisfy them with the actual product and post-purchase experiences, which include fulfillment and delivery and all those other things that you need to be great at. So those are the things. And I think a lot of manufacturers who are used to wholesale, and really, to be honest, a lot of them don't know a lot about their direct customers. They're better off outsourcing it to a firm that does this a lot for CPGs, rather than assuming that the same people who built what they already have can figure out e-commerce.
Yeah,
I agree with that totally. Spend, hiring an e-commerce director of e-commerce marketing, someone who's good at PPC, and figuring out that's a lot of stuff for a manufacturer to figure out.
Yeah, definitely. I had worked at a place, and we were always distributing to retailers like grocery stores and drugstores and things of that nature. And so, the business was very much the model of, getting out, not necessarily full case quantities, but close to full case quantities, and getting them out to the retailer. And there was no real direct to consumer. And then they decided, let's try it. We have products that we distribute that
right,
consumers would be. So let's set a little something up. And so they set it up, and they're like, oh, we'll launch it, the week of Black Friday or whatever. So they launched it, and it was, well, I guess a good thing that they were
probably
so
the worst
sick.
choice you can ever make to launch before Black Friday, by the way.
Yeah, so they really I guess they didn't know what to expect. So they had expected a certain amount of sales maybe was their goal, and what happened was it just exploded, and I think they did it was 3 or 4 times the goal, but they didn't have the infrastructure in place to fulfill to that. They had the stock, but it was all about getting the orders out then, and they got themselves in real trouble because they ended up getting backed up, and then they weren't delivering on the service level to the customer, so they actually had to say, whoa, we gotta shut this off and take a step back and now actually figure this e-commerce thing out and see how it works, because obviously there's interest, but we gotta figure out how to do it the right way. Like you said, you gotta make sure that you can deliver on that service to the customer, because then they're not gonna come back, and there's so many other options, of course, to buy things. So it was pretty interesting. So yeah, I mean, like you said, I think going to a different company that can set you up and do it for you is probably a smart thing, because like you said, you have all these other things in play that you have to ramp up fairly quickly to get to that point. So what else would you say is important in order to set up e-commerce? Maybe from a fulfillment standpoint, it's a totally different, I wouldn't say a different world, but it's a totally different way of fulfilling orders than from a B2B standpoint, where you're doing mostly full case, pallet quantities, things of that nature. Now you're getting down to each pick and all these different things. So what kind of expectations would you say a company should have in terms of change in that arena?
I think the change, particularly from a supply chain point of view, is pretty massive. And there are just lots of things they've never done before. So you find people that are like, oh, well, if I do one part of e-commerce very well, then it's going to work. For instance, if I can just get people to the website, it's going to be successful. And that was kind of the problem that you pointed out with the last company you mentioned.
Yes,
and then there are people who have the opposite view that I've been shipping pallets forever. I know how to do it. How hard can it be to ship eaches? And so they figure out technically how to ship eaches, right?
Yeah.
They're able to ship direct to consumer one box at a time, but they don't do it very well, and they don't know what good is. So I think the biggest thing in the supply chain point of view is to go to eBay and go to Amazon and write down what their standards are for sellers and supply chain.
Yeah.
Write them down, copy those metrics, and then first of all, figure out how to measure that in your own business, and then try every day and treat any product that doesn't hit those metrics as a defect. So I think what people forget in direct-to-consumer e-commerce, that any marketplace seller who's on there for 5 minutes, you're going to get kicked off if you don't ship same day. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if you get an order by 8 o'clock, it needs to go out by 3 p.m. No questions. It doesn't matter the reason. So that's the bar that consumers are expecting. It's not Amazon's fault that that's the bar. That's what consumers expect. Maybe they train them. You can say they trained them or not, and a lot of people could disagree on that. But the reality is that's where we are.
Yeah.
And so I think if most manufacturers, their head would explode if they thought that they could get an order in by 10 o'clock and it has to be out by 2.
Yeah.
It would just be, they think you were from another planet. And you ask them, what your same-day ship the same day ship on time delivery rate is, and you're like, huh? What do you mean? The order went out. It's the carrier's problem now. Like, no, it's not the carrier's problem. It's actually your problem, because the consumer's going to yell at you. Yeah, the consumer's going to yell at you, and you can't pass the buck to the down somewhere else in the supply chain anymore.
Definitely, yeah. So I mean, I think it is, it's definitely a big shock, like you said, and I think it is like a total change in perspective and perception. So I like the tip that you gave, like to look at those requirements from like eBay and Amazon and those different types of things, and try and see how can you fit your business into meeting those demands before you find out later that you're not meeting those demands from your customers and you have a bunch of angry customers. So Rick, it's been great talking to you. How can people, I guess, read more about your insights? Obviously, I mentioned LinkedIn, so they can search for Rick Watson on LinkedIn. But how can they get in touch with you otherwise, and what's your website for your consulting business?
So my website is www.rickwatson.io, and anyone can find me there, or you can find me on LinkedIn, as you mentioned.
Okay, definitely. And we'll definitely post links to both of those on thenewwarehouse.com. So, Rick, thank you so much for joining us on the show and talking e-commerce today. Definitely so many more topics that we could talk about, so hopefully we'll have you on the show in the future as well. So thanks again for being on the show, and this has been the New Warehouse Podcast.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.